G'day everyone, this is Footyology TV live from the studios of Southern FM in Brighton. I'm Rowan Connolly.
I'm Mark Fine.
We are here to wrap up another thrilling round of AFL football, one with big ramifications for the top eight and particularly today. What'd you make of it all?
Look, before I start, I've got to say, I love broadcasting from this new studio. It's cold and it's orange. I feel like I'm inside a Sunny Boy.
Well, we're actually in the offices of the Hari Krishna, Finey, so...
Everything's orange.
No, I'm just kidding, we're not, but we decided to mix it up a bit, so we've gone for a different look this week. Let us know what you think, and a key part of this show, as per last week, and we want to ramp this up, is viewer involvement. So on the live stream, plenty of room there for your questions and comments. Please leave them. We will do our best to get through the best of them. Can't promise we'll get to everyone, but we've got a very capable social media team on the case. So leave your questions and comments. We'll rip through them. Before we get to the wraparound, I think we should have a quick zip through the ladder at the moment. Richmond on top, as per usual, 48 points. Really good percentage too. Second, equal on 44 points, but ahead on percentage, the Magpies. Third, West Coast, Finey, 44 points. Port Adelaide, those three teams all on 44 points. Sydney now relegated to fifth in 40. Melbourne, 36. Geelong, 36. Hawthorn, 36. That is the top eight. Outside the eight on percentage only, and not a lot, is North Melbourne, also on 36. After that, GWS, 34 points. Adelaide, 28, with a rotten percentage. Essendon, 28, with a rotten percentage. I think we can just about officially write those two off.
As they say in racing, we don't need to go back any further than that. Just looking at the ladder, I guess some of the stories out of the round, North Melbourne probably didn't take full advantage of having a depleted Gold Coast at their mercy at Etihad Stadium today. So they miss out on a spot in the eight tonight that could have been theirs. Richmond have forged to the top. I think most people, and we'll talk about it during the program, would think that this round just further magnifies their domination in the competition as we sit here tonight. But this is the first time they've got some clean space with game and big percentage break on the rest of the field.
I think in terms of significance to the ladder, probably the costliest defeat was the last one suffered by the Giants, who were really good in Perth but just couldn't get over the line. That could really cost them because they have a particularly rugged run home. We'll talk about this in the wraparound. Let's get to that right now. See how slick we're getting with all the titles and graphics and everything?
Where's the music coming from?
I knew this would work. Mr. Music over there is queuing up the music. Well, like I said, huge ramifications, not just for GWS, but for West Coast. Fantastic game this was over at Optus Stadium, and West Coast prevailing despite the absence of Kennedy, Darling, Lacroix, Ryan, Barras. Great effort by them, really, to win, break a sequence of three losses in a row. 13-8. 86, the Eagles defeated GWS 10-15. 75, what'd you make of the game?
Look, it was kind of fair. We know that the West Coast Eagles are forward line depleted. Really sad news with John O'Patten going down during the week, third knee injury. But that, with Cameron's indiscretion, meant that these were two powerhouse teams without their powerhouse forwards. And really, when you looked at the sides on paper, and everything you instinctively probably knew before the season, more than now, you'd say GWS had the dominant midfielder, and even away from home had the right to win the game. But West Coast, much better performance by Nick Natanui as compared to the game against Adelaide. He sort of led the brigade. Gaff was great for most of the game. And I was really impressed by their midfield's ability to win first possession and be decisive in a lot of the game.
Well, I thought their midfield really rose to the challenge. Now, an important run with roll by Hutchings on Kelly, and major stats winners, Gaff 41, Redden 32, I thought he was really good, Shuey 32 and Yo 32. Now, they haven't played well as a group for some weeks, and that made all the difference to them, really.
You know what was disappointing? They were great. You know what was disappointing from GWS's perspective? the game was still certainly alive right up to the end. I mean, they were sort of 2 goals down at the most with 3 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Now, in that last 5 minutes, or say the last 3 minutes of the game, Maston was able to get the ball and then play kick-to-kick 3 times with a teammate, and Gaff got the ball and played kick-to-kick 3 or 4 times with a teammate. Now, you have to pick up every player and force them to kick down the line. Their season almost was on the line, and GWS, again, just doesn't have that professional hard edge to close out close games.
Now, in ladder terms, this is just huge, isn't it? West Coast, as we said before, third now. They're only 1.5% behind the Magpies. They've got a few winnable games coming up, but you sort of feel like they have to get second rather than third, don't you? They need to be playing a home final.
Well, they crave the opportunity to have 2 home finals and then a grand final.
Now, by the same token, GWS only 2 points out of the 8. But have a listen to their run home. Richmond, Port Adelaide.
Where?
I didn't write that down. Sorry, I should have. St Kilda.
We could almost work that out and assume Port Adelaide's in Adelaide, given that Port Adelaide played there this week. It tends to be Adelaide's turn next week, Port Adelaide the week after.
Regardless, it's a tough one. St Kilda next, Carlton next, to give them wins
Both
there.
of those will be one.
Adelaide, now I think they've already played in Adelaide, so that'll be at the Giants' home.
Yep.
But then Sydney and Melbourne to finish off.
You know, I don't reckon it's a terrible
Oh, geez,
run
I reckon
home.
it's pretty testing.
Well, look, they get St Kilda and Carlton. St Kilda, who they drew with, they play at Spotless, so they'll win. Carlton, they'll defeat. Sydney, I've got some queries about, and that game has a bit of a life of its own that GWS performed quite well in. And you know what? Melbourne, last game of the season.
Oh, the traditional Melbourne
meltdown.
Well, yeah.
It's not horrific.
I think when you compare it to the draw of both Hawthorn and North Melbourne, who are immediately above them, they've definitely got the poor end of a deal. We'll get to that when we talk about those two teams.
And just on that, remember, percentage doesn't mean anything for GWS unless they draw again.
Correct.
So they need to finish. A team needs to finish top 4, especially a young, in the mind team like GWS. That draw is tough enough to make sure that they don't make top 4. So you're right. It's not a great run home, given where they need to be to mount another attempt to make a grand final. You're right there.
Do you agree about West Coast being second as opposed to third?
They have to be.
Yeah.
Well, we still don't know whether they can play at the MCG. This was such an important win for them. No matter who is available or unavailable, they have to win at Optus in WA, back home. And they keep that hope alive. It shows how important the Collingwood Essendon game was.
Yeah.
This is what we love. Look, our competition has quite a unique way of reaching a final conclusion. A final 8 is big, convoluted, and some people think it's too many. But you know what? When you look at the numbers, it's certainly interesting. And home finals become so important, don't they? So we've got mini finals all the way to September now.
Yeah, I think there's less of an argument that there's too many now, because I think there's less of a gap between the top and bottom of the 8, with the exception of the top team. Let's go to the second game. The second game on Sunday, actually, and it was a ripper. It was Essendon Collingwood at the G, almost 70,000 there, 69,868. Pretty good effort considering how cold and wet it was, and it lived up to the hype, I reckon, and full credit to the Pies, who really turned it on in the last quarter and ended up winning 12-6-78, defeating the Bombers 9-8-62, hanging on to that second spot and pretty much ending the Bombers' finals chances. I might go first on this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you, before you do go first, can I just, on a personal...
going first, yeah.
Not about the game, on a personal basis... Well done, Nigel Carmody. He's been with Channel 7 calling VFL football and the odd game of AFL football when numbers demanded it. Also calls for the ABC. Nigel, a great mate of mine that I met through working with him at SEN. He's a player manager, was a very good VFL footballer, great bloke, and was a great foil with BT today in a big game. Thumbs up, Nigel.
Okay, I thought the Bombers for 3 quarters gave it pretty much everything. I thought the loss of Fantasia pre-game was absolutely critical and would have been enough to have me change my tip, which in retrospect I wish I had. But they hung in there. In the end, though, I think the Pies, it was a real tribute to that Collingwood midfield. In the last quarter, I thought Pendlebury really came to the fore. De Goey stood up and was really dangerous up forward. They started winning all those centre clearances. Taylor Adams, I thought, had a really big last quarter.
Sade Batom.
Oh, yeah, in his 200th. He's always good, though, isn't he? You sort of take it for granted with him. And I think ultimately, and we will talk about the umpiring because it was a fairly thorny issue, but I don't think that made the difference. And to me, I think it made a difference. I don't think it was a difference between one side winning or the other. And ultimately, it probably says about the gap between where those two sides are.
Yeah, when you have a game like that, it was a compelling game to watch because I think we knew just by the way Essendon attacked the game that they knew that this was a final for them. And you need to have, in the modern game, halfback flankers are so important for rebound and for repel. And they're really well served, Collingwood, with Jeremy Howe, who's an excellent player. Don't worry about the spectacular nature of his marking because they are intercept marks. They generally, come from the boot of the opposition, kicking the ball forward. And on the other halfback flank, Langdon is a powerful, commanding footballer. And I really think that's where Collingwood sort of repelled Essendon, who had every bit of the game for 3 and a bit quarters.
Well, the other side of the coin there is I think they managed to really thwart the run of Adam Sard, who's been an outstanding foreman today, had his quietest game for some time.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting, though. You've got sort of two different sides. You've got the run and gun off the Essendon half-back line compared to more the aerial skill and set-up kicking from Langdon.
Yeah. I thought Essendon's midfield, which has been an Achilles heel for a long time, for 3 quarters, I thought they more than held their own. I thought Merritt was terrific. Devon Smith, he's a gun. What a fantastic pickup he's been.
Did momentum get thwarted a bit when Merritt went off with that injury concern just for a little while?
What period was that?
Just in the last quarter.
Oh, yeah. Look.
Because he was close to best on ground.
Yeah, I mean, look, Essendon kicked the first goal of the last quarter. Mitch Brown kicked it. Mark Baggerley had a chance to actually put him 2 goals up.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like that at the end. I felt that was the moment Collingwood said, right, here we go. I wouldn't say so far as, it showed they've got a higher gear, but I thought it was a really gritty sort of, and the leaders were the guys that drove it. Okay, the umpiring, because it's been a really... controversial. The numbers now. I know the free kick numbers, don't have to be the be all and end all. It was 17-27. Collingwood winning the 27 free kicks. I thought the umpiring was terrible. I hardly ever say this. Can I just stress? I hate going on about the umpiring. I thought it was terrible today, and I thought Essendon got the rough end of a deal early on. I thought in the second half, Collingwood got a few absolute shockers as well. But there was a lot of no feel, inconsistency. One stage, I think Devon Smith wrapped up, I'm trying to remember who the Collingwood player was, but like 3 times, no holding the ball paid, and then they paid one late against Heppel for an inconsequential in the back.
Now, that was extraordinary because that was off the back of a tackle by Merritt where the Collingwood player dropped the ball. And then the follow-up for that was maybe Heppel falling on top of the pair of them. And an extraordinary call of in the back.
Yeah.
Now, they're the sort of decisions that lack touch for the game because if you don't, the umpire that's called play on for the dropping the ball then must have a level of tolerance and forgive Heppel if he fell into the situation because he's really let the Collingwood player off first.
Well, the other one I'm still mystified about, and we can't even agree what it was actually for, was that 50 against Brendan Goddard.
Yeah, well, that was very interesting,
because
wasn't it?
Because my feeling is, and correct me if we're wrong and they've talked about this and we've missed it, but I felt like they paid that 50 because he took was it side bottom, out of the next act of play. You think it was for not getting back on the mark?
Yeah, I thought it was because he was getting told to move back 2 metres.
I think play was still continuing though.
I thought he got told when Sidebottom had the ball to move back, but he didn't hear it. I'd love to hear from people who might have been sort of boundary side and closer to the incident than I was from my living room.
Speaking of which, because we've got to move on, but Stephen Giles, now this is what we're after, people. Get in, leave your comments, we'll talk about them. Stephen says, if Richmond don't win, the Pies are as much a chance as anybody, I think. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't think so.
You don't think they're a chance? They have to be a chance, Finey.
I mean, if Richmond don't win, okay. I think in the end, not having Treloar and Lyndon Dunn even, not so much Ben Reid, will count against them.
Okay, tell me this though. If like, all I'm saying is I've got Richmond out ahead, but if it's not them, I probably think the next best chance actually might be Port Adelaide, but I wouldn't say that with any great confidence. Port is definitely a better chance than Collingwood. So in my eyes, Collingwood...
See, I don't read it like that.
Yeah, well, okay.
Because I read West Coast actually getting to second and Collingwood, because of those key players out, not being able to win interstate in the finals.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Port, they're hardly a smoky. They're fourth on the ladder now, but I like their chances. Particularly, I think, this is an interesting one. The Pies play the Tigers when? 2 weeks from now?
Yep.
But right at the moment, I reckon Port is probably as good a chance of knocking over Richmond when it counts as anyone.
So, again, I don't agree. I think they've got a big problem. Either Ryder's injured or running out of momentum.
Well, we'll talk about this when we get to their game. Let's move on. We feel the third, we talk in more depth about the 3 feature games each round. We selected our third game as the Friday night game, Richmond taking on Adelaide, grand final rematch, not replay. But in this case, you could have almost called it a grand final replay because the scores were very similar.
Do-over.
The margin was very similar.
Yep.
And even the way the game unfolded was pretty similar. Adelaide actually started better. And then Richmond gradually sort of worked their way back into it in that first quarter and then just sort of steamrolled them from there. And you could just see the air go out of the Adelaide tyres. I must say, I can't remember too many games where the margin at the final quarter has been 16 points and yet that felt closer to 10 goals.
Yeah.
Never felt like the Crows were a chance. And it looked like the Crows themselves didn't think they were a chance, didn't it?
Yeah, and for good reason. Because they were playing against a team. Well, they were playing against a team that bested them at that ground in the big one. And we know that the aftermath, and there was still talk, there's all talk about what's wrong with Adelaide. You know what's wrong with Adelaide? Wasn't the pre-season camp, wasn't the disappointment of the grand final. I think they're all overlays from other people. The problem with Adelaide is that when they're not at full strength, they're nowhere near good enough. They've got some fringe players that just don't cut it for mine.
Here's the problem with Adelaide. Betts, Brad Crouch, Cam Ellis Yeoman, Riley Knight, David Mackay, Mitch McGovern, Brodie Smith.
Yeah, of course. And put those in. Look, put in Betts and Brodie Smith and I'd be happy for them to be right up there and competing.
Well, it's not just that either. It's like Tex Walker not having a pre-season. He's been below his best all year.
That's what he is.
Jenkins missed...
No, hang on, let's talk about Tex Walker for a sec. That's what he is.
Oh, yeah.
I should have said on Thursday night. On Thursday when we did the audio podcast, I should have said one of the big things against Adelaide is that Tex Walker's not going to play 2 decent games in a row. And that's his form. It is his form.
I think that's a bit harsh.
I don't.
Kicked 70-odd goals last year, didn't he?
Well, again, he's a very, very big half-forward flanker. I'd like to see him, put his hand up for the long ball and compete and bring the ball to ground for the size he is. Look, he's been questioned before in his grand final in his game on Friday night. The reason he gets questioned. I want to talk about Richmond.
Yeah.
Because here's a team that, and I think rightfully managed by Hardwick, was motoring along at the top of the ladder, but not in overdrive prior to the bye. And now we see Richmond gearing up. And what are the great things that Richmond have going for them? Here's what they've got going for them. Rewald's in career best. He is in such good form. We know Rance is great. Coxon's great. They're sort of super bankable. Dustin Martin at half-time, I was asking myself, what's going on with Dusty? He's sort of part going. It's like somebody turned a switch on, and in that second half, it was 2017 revisited.
He's done that a lot.
And I think, he's ready to take the rest of the year by storm. Wait till hot or not, but Daniel Rioli, I'm not worried, Cyril retired, Daniel takes over the... That's great. That's great fodder for the uninformed. You know what the important thing is? He is a brilliant high-pressure forward who's fully fit now and a brilliant addition for the second half of the year.
His pressure has actually been measured as being greater than that of Butler and Castagna. I tried to encapsulate, just in a couple of notes, what makes Richmond so good. It's not just about their pressure, it's about their positioning behind the ball. One thing that really struck me on Friday night was every time they forced the Adelaide turnover, not near goal, Adelaide kicked the ball straight back to them. So their positioning is great, and that's a real credit to the coaching staff. And I know it's something they've worked on pretty hard. And
they've positioned a guy that has played a lot of his football ahead of centre, plays that role now, Shane Edwards, brilliantly.
Yep. They've got incredible faith in each other. Hence, you look at them, they're always knocking the ball forward. They know someone's going to be there. Yep. A couple of those Dusty Martin centres on Friday night, he didn't know that there was definitely someone there, but he knew someone would be there.
Yep.
And the other thing I think they do really well is spot up targets inside, very short inside the 50. You notice how many shots at goal they take from between that 35 to 50 metre arc.
And who's their favourite target there? The man with the best hands.
Caddy.
Yeah. And they know it. Huge frustration barracking for a lower club.
Yeah.
That it's all well and good to hit up a player, but know your teammates.
Yeah.
Know that you're hitting up a guy that's not got a great pair of hands, or even if he marks it, is not a great kick. Richmond don't do that. When Caddy gets on the lead, he deserves and he gets those short kicks because he honours them.
Yeah, I reckon also when you talk about sides having a high gear, that game to me felt like that was a classic example of a side with a high gear.
Yep.
They soaked up the pressure, and then when the time came, I said, okay, let's dispense with this challenge, and they did it, bang, like that. They are so clearly the side to beat for this flag. Again, your input, keep it coming, we're not ignoring it. Mark Chapman says Richmond are lucky not getting injuries.
No, they're not.
Well, I know what you're going to say. Their injury management has been terrific, but there has to be an element of luck about it. They've had incredible durability out of their star players. I think I did the numbers. I think last year, Rance, Cochin, Martin and Rewalt between them missed or played 118 out of 120 games.
And they've done that all their careers.
Yeah.
They are durable types.
Yeah.
But Richmond have suffered otherwise. Rioli's only just come back.
Yeah.
Basher Hooley's not playing. Arguably best on the ground in grand final last year.
Yeah.
Have a look on Friday night. Broad was almost best on ground.
He was great.
Did his shoulder. Graham was fantastic.
Yeah.
Got injured.
Shoulder.
And you know what?
Actually, Broad was cheekbone, wasn't he? And Graham shoulder.
Sorry, other way around. You know what? They're going to lose two players that were brilliant.
Yeah.
And they'll have a better team next week because they'll get Floston back.
Yeah.
And they've got somebody else coming back in the side as well.
McIntosh.
No, he can't make it. But tell us if you can remember who's coming in. But definitely Floston, and they've got another gun coming back in that side.
Well, they've got a guy like Shy Bolton, who I thought would become a permanent member of that side. He can't even get a look in now.
Yeah. Look, he might get an opportunity if they go like for like down with Jack Graham. But they've had players that most other teams would mark as top liners get injured, but they've just been able to fill their boots with those sort of players.
All right, have we got another question there quickly?
Hooley coming back.
Oh, Hooley coming back?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got Bash coming back.
All right, thanks. Keep the feedback coming. We want this to be a two-way thing. Let's move on to our next game. Thursday night now, I seem to say it's everywhere. It seems like a long time ago. Is this the last of the Thursday games? I think it might be. Hope so.
What do you make for the push for permanency?
Not all season. I think limited doses, and not when the bye rounds are on. And I understand that helps them facilitate the the gap between
breaks.
games, but it spreads it too thin, I reckon.
And just on that, it's worked well because they have been very good games.
The Thursday night ones, well, the Friday night ones this year have, for the better part, been duds, so it's sort of helped. Okay, incredibly inaccurate, the Cats, but they got there in the end. 8-23-71, defeated Sydney 9-5-59. And you sort of felt like the Cats were really controlling the whole game, didn't you? But they just couldn't put them away.
Yeah.
Okay, Geelong. Where are we on Geelong? I keep saying, to me, they're good, but sort of not quite good enough. I suppose I'm looking at the ladder now, and if we're to regard the likes of Collingwood, West Coast and Port as legitimate chances, why shouldn't Geelong be? And I think there's an argument in that. I've had issues with the bottom few members of their 22. They always seem a little bit iffy, some of those younger guys. But I think the other side of that coin is they've spread the load around a bit better. I mean, for instance, Tim Kelly got to be the recruit of the year in terms of a player not in the system before coming into a club. He's been absolutely outstanding. Mitch Duncan is, on the same level, I think, now as Selwood, Ablett, Dangerfield in terms of his impact on the side. Menegola not quite there, but still very handy. I think Hawkins is hitting some form again. And when you think about guys still to come back, Menzel being the big, they can improve. There's no doubt about that. I don't know what it is. It's just a psychological thing. They still don't strike me as being quite dependable enough. Still prone to having a bit of an off day, and I think Essendon caught them on one of them early this year. But then I'm starting to think about Sydney in exactly the same way. I've got a lot of regard for Sydney, but they seem to have a level that they can't just get past.
I think they've got two separate issues, these teams. Geelong, the modern game, and have a look at the Premiers. It's about transition. It's about moving the ball, and it's really about being able to move the ball from a kick in from a point or deep in defence, right down the ground without turning it over, and opening the game up. And Richmond do it with great run. Hawthorn did it with precision kicking in their triple premiership era. And Geelong have to, I think their big problem is that they have a backline that just doesn't have those attributes. Geelong. They don't have the run out of the back line.
It's not a great rebounding. Well,
I just don't find that. I don't find their
what about
movement.
Stewart and Toohey?
No, Toohey. I think Toohey's pretty overrated. He gives the ball a slug. He tries to kick it long, but he's not a runner. He's definitely not a great mover. When I say overrated, he does his job, but he's not a game-breaking halfback flanker. Stewart's a great reader of the game. He's a really good general behind that line. But they don't have that. To me, they just don't have the movement out of the back line.
Let's talk about the Swans. Good question here from Josh Marr. Thanks, Josh. John Longmire should have the Swans players watch a few Richmond games and see what hitting a short target inside 50 looks like. I was just thinking, looking at the scores, they're starting to look a bit sort of buddy conscious again, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
They went through a period where that didn't seem to be the case.
I mean, that short target, I'm sure that the communique deals with hitting somebody up 15, 20 metres away. But we can look at it the other way, because Richmond have short targets in the forward line in terms of 180 centimetres, 178 centimetres. And Sydney just don't hit those, don't look for those players. They've got Ronke there, who's a really interesting little
but hang on,
dangerous footballer.
Is it that though, or is it that their midfielders don't have the same capacity to get forward and be dangerous goal kickers? Like Kennedy doesn't.
Yeah. But they're small forwards.
Hanbury can't get a kick. Parker has sort of done a bit of it, but I don't think they have as many of them as, say, Richmond or Collingwood do.
No, I agree. Their midfield doesn't have those attributes, but they really do. I don't know whether it's a nature of playing at the SCG. They really do kick it up to Buddy or, kick it to the top of the square.
Yeah.
They're not hitting up enough of the Haywoods, the Florence, Ronke, Papley. Most of those guys survive on crumbing or turnover oppression. They're good players. I don't think there's enough faith in them as alternatives to Buddy going forward.
What about the other thing that occurs to me with the Swans is I always go back to 2012 when they won it, and the season of Lewis Jetta that season, he was pivotal to them because he had that dash and, dare I say it, X factor. I've always felt like they've never quite recaptured that spark that they had that year, and particularly in that final series. Don't you feel like that? There's something a little bit sort of pedestrian about them, workmanlike, and apart from Buddy, obviously, is as brilliant as it gets, but I mean, particularly with midfield running types, they're all a bit the same way, I reckon.
Well, that's why Heaney was a big out.
Yeah.
Because he is that marking bob-up X factor that is taller and dangerous. I'll talk about it in hot or not, but I think you make a fair point. I don't think that the Sydney Swans...
Talk about it in hot or not.
Just on their team in general, I don't think that the Sydney Swans have a side... And isn't it funny that we've found out first at the SCG, I don't think they've got a side that can go very far without their best 22 on the ground.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. We've got another one here. No. Okay, let's move on up to the Gabba on Saturday afternoon, and they call it the Gabatoir. Well, they did back in the good old days for the Lions, but it certainly returned to those sort of days on Saturday because they were red hot as much as their opponent was not. Brisbane 18-12, 120, smashed Carlton 7-13. 55, and quarter time scores didn't necessarily suggest it, but thought the writing was on the wall very, very early in this game. Brisbane runners just getting heaps of space up forward, where Eric Hipwood, who we'll talk about a bit later on, was terrific for them. And the Blues just lost interest very, very quickly in this game, and it was, to me, a bit of a repeat of that Fremantle game down here a few weeks ago. So much so, and I've now lost this stat. I wrote it down. It was a beauty too. At three-quarter time in this game on Saturday, I remember the number, 211 disposals Carlton had to three-quarter time.
Yep.
I'd love to know the last time in fine conditions a side had had that few disposals after three-quarters of the game. They just didn't look interested at all.
Well, 30 of those disposals, even at three-quarter time, were sitting in the grandstand. Late withdrawal of Cade Simpson. So they lost their shape and their backline got hammered because Marchbank had some sort of heart irregularity.
Yeah.
And Wiedering, who was trying to be the loose player, got injured. He had a sore calf. So that backline became, by the early withdrawal of Simpson and those two, a complete mess. Now, sometimes I look at those best players and I get really angry, as officially listed. All right, Carlton's best players, Cruiser, sort of barely. Second best player, Charlie Curnow, and they've written it because Charlie kicked 3 goals out of 7 in a poor performance, and he's a very talented player. He was annihilated on the weekend. We can look at beams and big names, but Gardner played a great game with him.
I know where that comes from. It's just that they don't want to only give them 3 best players, but maybe there are times when you need to be
But I'm just saying that his direct opponent, and he got frustrated, Curnow.
Let's go to this comment. It's a good one. Wowdy, sorry if that's not how you pronounce it. Should the AFL hand Carlton a priority pick? My answer is pretty short and sweet. No, no, and then no again.
They're only at the end of the first round.
I don't care.
No, I'm saying, but they're not. That's not going to make... Pick number 19 or 20. That's not where Carlton's improvement is going to come from. Carlton's improvement comes from a lot of patience, because at the moment there are 4 or 5 guys on that field that are so physically not suited to AFL football. Everybody loves Zach Fisher, but he gets thrown around like a rag doll. Lockie O'Brien's tiny. Paulson is undersized. These are... You put 4 or 5 of them in a game of AFL football, you're going to get bashed.
Well, just one last thing, we've got to move on. But this stuff, every time Carlton gets smashed, you hear this, Brendan Bolton's got to go. No, he doesn't have to go, because a new coach comes in and it takes him another 2 years to get the list he wants to work with. Carlton's issues, and they don't extend back 20 years. They actually had a pretty good crack at it under Brett Ratton, made finals 3 years in a row, and were a kick away from preliminary final in 2011. However, their list management and recruiting between 2009 and 2014 was horrendous. They gave away all those good players who have started other clubs, And the numbers at the draft table, this doesn't include trades, 30 players picked up in all those drafts, 5 of them left. That they have turned over an entire list in 3 years, and they've had to. And I keep saying this, the rebuilding process when you start from scratch takes 6, 7, 8 years. It was the case with Geelong. The foundation of those Geelong Premiership sides was built on the drafts of 99, 2000, 2001. It takes that long. To get rid of Brendan Bolton now would be absolute madness. That, however, doesn't excuse the lack of effort. But I'm not saying the lack of effort means that they're not playing for the coach. I think that's really simplistic thinking. One more quick one. Mark Williams. Rayner's fend off at the start of the game as a sign of things to come. I presume you mean in Rayner's form. Gee, we were saying before he even played, gee, he looks like Dusty Martin. Well, he's playing like him.
And
he's pretty impressive.
Well, now comparisons are being made. McCluggage is starting to look more and more like Nigel Lappin, a beautiful mover, and he's got one problem. I really like McCluggage. Gee, he's bad around goal. He is one of the worst kicks of goal you'll ever see. From a set shot.
That's a big call this year because there's been some shockers.
You know, he kicked a goal on the weekend though.
Yeah,
McCluggage.
Did he?
He was that close to the line. He was half a metre out. But his field kicking's superb.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing.
They're the best, I said this last year, best wooden spoon team I've ever seen. They've won 3 games now, but there's only 2 games that have actually been taken to the cleaners in. They've been consistently competitive. I reckon they've been good.
And they lost a guy that was almost all Australian last couple of weeks, Harris Andrews, and they've won those 2 games really well.
Yeah.
You know, you want to talk about, we should mention Hipwood because he's so important.
Later.
Okay.
I've got him. I will mention him. Let's go to Port Adelaide, St Kilda, the twilight game on Saturday, the Power, 12-14-86. Beat the Saints 7-8-50.
Do you want to do this guy?
Well, I watched it as well, but geez, it was a struggle to stay awake because it was just one of those wins you sort of chalk up and move on, wasn't it?
That game was everything you expected it to be, and it delivered. Port Adelaide were the better team, but they were not motivated to do... St Kilda worked quite hard, so if you want to thrash them, you really have to put your mind to it. Otherwise, in a game like that, you can just beat them, which they did.
Ramifications out of that. I was just about to tweet the moment he injured himself, how good is Tom Jonas?
Yep.
And then he hurt his knee. So he really... I don't think the backline would disintegrate without him, but he is the general of that backline. Yeah, they can. I love their backline. Cleary, Burn-Jones, Pittard when he's been there. I'm missing someone. Houston, Howard.
Yeah, that backline is the best part of that team's improvement this year comes down back. That's...
One of the things I most wish for is Dan Houston never makes another mistake in his career finding, just so he can avoid
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
I want to just make special mention of Jack Steele. He was fantastic. He played on Ollie Wines. Hello to Mrs. Wines or whatever.
Yeah, hi, Jane.
Hi, how are you? But he played a great game on Ollie.
Yeah, it was the quietest game he's had for ages.
He beat him. He got 25 of his own.
Yeah.
But there's only one way you can beat Ollie Wines. You've got to be prepared for some very physical... Because, Ollie got the ball and Jack 3 or 4 times brought him to a dead stop.
Yeah.
Got to be pretty strong to do that. Unheralded a bit, Jack Steele, but he played a great game.
Just a quick one on Port, because I was talking him up as a potential challenger to Richmond. Obviously, they have to play better than they played on the weekend. But some good longer-term signs for them. The imports, Watt's got back in the team for starters, but Motlop is starting to play some really good footy. Rockcliffe has really come good for him as well. Lindsay Thomas has got in there and done a couple of things and there.
Thomas, very good.
So they've got depth, and I think guys who can potentially make a real difference at the business end of the year.
Motlop, symptomatic almost of Motlop. Best on ground a quarter time. 10 touches, a class above everybody else on the field. Second quarter, unsighted, 1 touch. My query for them is, Paddy Ryder, he's just going, and they need Paddy Ryder. They don't really have an alternative in the ruck, and he is just going. So is he sore? There's ankle concerns, or is he getting a bit old? One way or the other, they need more from him.
All right, let's move on. That noise you may be able to hear in the background, I think the Hari Krishna call centre is in overdrive at the moment. Is that actually a phone or is it...
No, it's okay. People are trying to get through to us, right?
Okay, well, we prefer you actually leave a question on Facebook. Don't try and ring it in. It's a bit 20th century, really.
But
All right.
But to pay the bills, we're also selling pizzas. That might be in order.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm hungry. You shouldn't have said that. Let's go to Etihad Stadium Saturday evening. And Hawthorn, 19-8-122, did a number on the Western Bulldogs, 9-5-59. I wrote a match report on this game for Footyology, footyology.com.au. You'll find the match report there. Hawk fans, I'm tipping Bulldogs fans probably won't want to read it. Two bursts were pivotal in this game. The first one lasted 10 minutes at the end of the first quarter. Bulldogs had got 13 points up. Hawks went bang, bang, bang. And I think Bruce got 3 of the 4 goals.
Yes.
Having restored the ledger somewhat, and the second quarter was a bit tit for tat. The third quarter, 7 goals for to 1 behind. And this was powerful Hawthorn circa 2014-15. And boy, did the leaders stand up. Isaac Smith, 10 possessions in that third quarter. Jared Roughhead, 8 possessions, couple of goals, I think 3 or 4 marks in that third quarter. Jack Gunston bobs up with 3 goals in that quarter. All the senior boys came to play, and when Hawthorn play like that, they can trouble, if not beat, any other side in the competition. Don't forget that early on, I think it was round 2 or 3, they pushed Richmond to within 13 points.
Yep.
Now, I know people look at Hawthorn and go, they're not that good, and they have weeks when they're a bit off their game. But when it clicks for them, they can play a level of footy as good as virtually anyone, I contend. Do you agree with that?
When they're going, these things happen, and you're spot on. Roughhead starts to impose himself up one end. Sicily is impassable. And they threw O'Meara into that powerhouse mix this week because Tom Mitchell was just a big part player. But interestingly, they got great sort of even more penetrating results from not only O'Meara but Howe as well.
Mm.
So I think at their very best, I'm not saying that they're anywhere near Richmond who are setting the bar, but in that other mix of playing teams like Collingwood and Port and West Coast, they're certainly they can match them. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, and they're in the 8 now. I think they'll stay there. And, look, I mean, gee, what are they? 2 games outside the top 4. They got a pretty good run home.
And if they finish 4th, after almost 100 years,
yeah,
a Richmond Hawthorn final for the first time ever.
Okay. I knew that was going to be obscure. It is a remarkable, what's the word I'm looking for?
A remarkable happenstance.
Yeah, okay, that'll do.
But it is extraordinary. They've never played in the final, Richmond Hawthorn.
Keep the comments and questions coming. David Dobbs, thanks David, says Hawthorn with a soft draw can still make the top 4 and outside Richmond are as good as anyone.
I think that's what we said.
On their day. So, yeah, yep. we're with you, David. Much respect for the Hawks. Can still pull out a brand of footy that really worries everyone. Okay, the only game we are yet to cover is the first game today. And let's be honest, it was pretty forgettable at Etihad Stadium.
There were some important things,
Can I read
though?
the scores?
There were some important things.
Well, you can tell us after I read the scores. North Melbourne, 14-11, 95. Defeated Gold Coast, 8-10, 58. Just before you start, I thought the Suns were far more competitive than they have been. Actually, it slipped towards the end a little bit, but they didn't have a goalless quarter or anything. And there was actually... They kept sort of shooting themselves in the foot. They were still within a couple of kicks, I think, early in the third quarter, and they just kept, a handball would go astray or they'd miss a shot at goal and it'd rebound and North would get a goal. North would want to play a lot better than that if they're going to climb into the 8.
Yeah, bad second quarter by North. Turnovers in the back half. McMillan, a terrible short kick.
That was a shocker, yeah.
Scotty Thompson, who had a really good game, he just handballed one to Jared Witts for a goal.
Yeah.
North were aiding and abetting Gold Coast at one point in time. I think Jared Witts played a good game.
Yeah.
Gold Coast are Gold Coast. They've got no midfield really, and they tried hard, but it's nice to see some of their players do some nice things now and then. But they're they're finding it hard north of the story because we want to analyse whether or not they can make the final 8. And it was interesting to see Meg Jack Daw push forward just for a short period. You know, I'm a big rap for him this year. He was good. I love Cunnington. I love him.
He's had a remarkable season.
If you watch him, you know, he's really a handball link man. He's great at the stoppages.
Yeah.
He's got perfect hands. He never fumbles it. Higgins, we know, is a good player. What North Melbourne desperately need is better form from guys like McMillan and Marley Williams and Atley, who was, I thought, disappointing.
Yeah.
These are players who've been around long enough. They're only going to make the 8 if Atley and Wright and McMillan, who've all played, you know, seasons of league football, do their bit.
I'll go further than that. I reckon they can only make the 8 if Jared Waite gets back into that team. Because I think he takes some of the focus off Brown, who still kicked 4 goals. But it just makes it easier for opposing defences to nail North on the scoring front if they can focus all their key position attention on Brown. Wade is pivotal to the way they set up and their scoring power, I think. Oh, we missed a game.
Melbourne Freo.
Sorry, my apologies, Melbourne and Freo fans. It was an easy one to miss, to be honest, up at the top end. Melbourne and Fremantle. I just happen to have the scores here. Thanks, Mr. Music, for filling us in on that one. The Demons. Talk about shockingly inaccurate. 13-24, 102. Smashed Fremantle 7-6-48. I think at one stage the Demons were 2-11. So the margin there, here we go, my maths again, 54. Should have been closer to 100, really, shouldn't it?
Well, it sort of like the Geelong-Sydney game. I mean, when you win by 5 goals 18, especially given the lack of pressure applied by the Fremantle team for the entire night.
Well, they won by 6 goals 18.
Oh, 6-18?
Yeah.
You really should win that game by 100 points. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't watch this game live. I watched it. I have a method of watching games where I sort of condense them down.
The fine method.
Yeah. You can watch a game of football with IQ in about 25 to 30 minutes. You know, getting rid of all the palaver. I watched this game in 10 minutes because I was only backtracking goals. Gee, they missed some shots, Melbourne, on the IQ. I mean, they really almost got bored out of this game, if that's possible. You know the sort of, in the end, the attention to detail needed for a player, you know, when they're really focused and it matters. None of these shots mattered.
Sorry.
There you go. But that's sort of what it was. It was like, a laconic shot of goal went through for a point, doesn't matter. Well, I'll have another go off the kick-in. And they just were... I hope it doesn't come back to haunt them with percentage, because that was 100 points at the offing.
Are we satisfied with that they have sort of returned to form, or is there still some way to go?
No, there's a heck of a way to go. They lost to St Kilda the week before.
Yeah.
They should have been on their mettle, regardless of the fact that the game was won at the first bounce.
What about the other mob? They annoy me. I'll tell you why. Because we had a crack at them earlier in the year about being totally uncompetitive away from home. They come here and smash Carlton, and it was Carlton, but they look really good that day. Yep. And now they lose Sandilands first, then they lose Fife, and it's like they just look at the injury list and go, look at the venue in the injury list. Nah, too hard.
That's exactly what happened. No Fife, no life. You know.
And what about Ross Lyons coming after the game? Well, sometimes you're just not good enough. It's sort of unlike Ross, isn't it? Is he getting a bit too accepting of defeat over there?
It almost suggested that on the way there they made that decision. And the only guy that really seemed motivated was somebody who hasn't played all year and was desperate to get some footy under his belt, Stephen Hill.
Yeah, well, he was their best by a long shot, wasn't he? Yeah. But I don't know, some of the young guys that I think have impressed me, just, I don't know, is the season getting too long, or are they getting dispirited? But they're looking, I don't know about their rebuild. I'm not convinced by it.
They had a big loss. Taberner came out of
he was going all right.
And they finally had a forward that they could build something around.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they've ever had any faith in McCarthy. You know, Kirsten McCarthy. I don't think the players bought into them.
Well, Kirsten hasn't worked out at all.
No,
They've been playing him in defence. Yeah.
But with Taberner, there was a real, all right, he's our man.
Yeah.
He stopped playing. The forward line became a bit dysfunctional. Then Fife went out, and they just, you'd love to play them without Fife next week. whoever's got it's got to buy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's all 9 games, isn't it, Mr. Music? We haven't, unless we want to start talking VFL, but I think we've got enough to go on with. Any more questions out of those games? No, I think everyone else was suitably bored with Fremantle and Melbourne as well. That is it for the wraparound for this week. It's time to move on to our next segment. Hot or not? I'm going to do that every week, I've decided.
That's my first not.
Come on, you can't beat a bit of air guitar, Finey. All right, I'm going to kick us off with a hot. Luke Breust. Is he the game's most underrated small forward still, after having played in, how many flags? 3. He didn't play in 08, did he? But 3 flags. He's been All-Australian. One of his career best games on Saturday night. 24 possessions, 6-2. 4 in the first quarter. He's just, thank you, Craig Williams, who says Luke Breust now the best small mid forward in the game.
Yep.
Great in general play, can take a mark, and brilliant crumbing. That's exactly what I was going to say, Craig. He's efficient. He's just efficient. He reads the play brilliantly. There's no sort of Eddie Betts about him. He doesn't necessarily do it spectacularly because he doesn't have to. He gets the ball in the right spots. He takes the percentage marks. He kicks the goals he should kick. And he's sort of, have a look at him. I mean, he's not, he's just sort of a pasty, sort of young Hawthorn player.
But he's not quite a small forward. He's not a little Eddie Betts, Stephen Milne, like the traditional forward pocket.
He's bigger than that. He's bigger than that.
With the sort of dazzling feet.
Yeah.
Because he can outmark you. Mm. He's a beautiful kick. At one stage, his first 6 goals were his first 6 kicks.
But I love his sort of lack of animation when he does something good. I sort of love guys that are efficient and do things consistently well and don't make a big song and dance about it. In that way, no, I better not say. I was going to say, in that way, he reminds me of Leon Baker when he went forward. But there's only one Leon Baker.
He's CBF, isn't he? Career best form?
Yeah, it'd have to be. And I reckon at this stage of your career, after being part of 3 premierships, it's a great effort. So very, very hot Luke Breust. You're right.
Yeah, good stuff. Hot for me, Daniel Rioli.
Oh, yeah.
He's kicking a goal maybe wasn't good at all, actually, on Friday night, but that's only cream on the cake for him. So fast on the tackle, run down, pressure. It's a great story to write. Still Rioli retires, but we're no lesser for it because Daniel Rioli takes up the mantle, and actually Willie Rioli played pretty well for the West Coast Eagles. But, wow, when you've got a forward line that applies enormous pressure in the first half of the year and you think, you're in the grips of the likes of Castagna and Graham and Shai Bolton when he plays, yet they all really play second fiddle to the king, the man who almost inspires that at Richmond. Rioli puts Richmond to me, in elections when they come back from polling booths and they declare a seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got the polling booth of Daniel Rioli to me I'm willing to declare Richmond the seat for 2018. I think they win the flag, not on the back of him, but he is the final piece in the perfect puzzle.
Well, one of the scariest things about that is Bruce was starting to get very excited about Daniel Rioli. I think we might have a replacement Rioli for Bruce. And
boy,
who can wait for the celebration of that for the next 10 years? Okay.
Delicious. When did he first taste Cyril that he came up with that term?
I don't know. Let's not go there. It's a lot safer not to. I'm going with the not next, and we did touch on this before. Sorry, Blues fans. And look, anyone who caught up with my tweets on Saturday, I wasn't defending them as such. I was talking about how big a hole they were left in list-wise. However, it doesn't excuse lack of effort. And people bristle sometimes and they say, well, as if footballers don't try. There's trying and there's trying. This was a side that looked to me like it knew things had conspired against them. They were playing in hot conditions. They were playing up at the Gabba. Lions were fired up. It didn't go well early and it just got a bit too hard for them. And some of the goals the Lions kicked in the second half there was one down the... I'm not sure whether it was the Vulture or Stanley Street end, but to the left of the screen. It was ridiculous. It was like a training drill. Brisbane had about 3 goes at kicking the goal before they kicked it. and they still had all the time in the world. In the end, I can't remember who it was in the end, but he just snapped it over his shoulder.
Was that the time when Cutler, he missed a really easy one?
And then, got one later.
And then straight away.
Yeah.
It was like Carlton sort of said...
It was that end.
Yeah, it was like Carlton sort of said, you know what, son? There's an easier way to kick a
we
goal. We'll step aside and actually let you kick a goal.
So, whilst I'm not of the school that Carlton needs immediate change, I think they need to not immediately change anything at all. But I reckon the players certainly deserve a rocket after that, because they weren't having a fair income crack, and it looked terrible. And I felt considerably for their long-suffering fans.
Not hot for mine is Sydney's depth. And, I think they've reached a critical point at the moment. Not that they've got hundreds of players out, but it's actually the Sydney team that I think we should have had after a decade and a half of finals and 2 premierships. The nature of a draft and a salary cap meant that this should have been the side that played on the weekend or on Thursday night, should have been the team that Sydney have to live with. And that is guys like Robinson and Towers in and out of the team. Because the 2 guys that didn't play, Callum Mills out for the year and Heaney, are both, contentious because they're academy players. I know Sydney fans are going to hate this, but you take them out of the team, and with the ageing midfield and a few turnstile players in and out of the side, Sydney's not a finals team. And, that's the team I think they should have. They don't have it. They're lucky. But without Heaney and Mills in the side, they're going to lose more than they win. Well,
I mentioned X Factor with him before. Heaney is as close as anyone to providing that, so he a massive loss for them. But I don't know. I think they've done pretty well with their list management, and they're not an ageing team necessarily. I don't know where they stand in the pecking order age-wise, but I think it's only about mid-table. And they do have some really good younger players, but there is something missing from that blend, and I look at it now, and like Geelong, I look at it and think it's not quite good enough to go all the way.
They do have some old players, though. Grundy.
Yeah.
I mean, the midfield's starting to look a bit...
Well, to that end, actually, the one that's hurt him a lot this year is Melican being injured, because he really has...
Tammy again.
Yeah.
So, Kieran Jack... That sort of players may be their last season. Jack got injured on the weekend.
Yeah.
McVeigh got injured.
Yeah, McVeigh didn't look good either.
Just sort of getting to the older end with a few players.
Yeah. All right, final hot for me, and we touched on him, Eric Hipwood. I know you at times have been critical of him in terms of consistency, and it's a fair enough criticism, but this was a very mouth-watering taste of what he can be in terms of a long-term star of the game.
Yep.
Very mobile. He's got a monster kick on him. It was his career best, 6 goals, 6-2 he kicked, 15 possessions, 7 marks. His previous career best was 4 goals. But he was just dangerous all day. And he's a 10-year player for mine, and the consistency will come. He's still pretty raw. I thought it was a great performance from him and really exciting to watch.
Okay, spot on. It's the first time in his career, I think 2 weeks in a row, he's got 15 or more possessions. Last week we observed in that very good win in Freo how good it was to see him up the ground. He kicked 6 goals and he played further up the ground.
Yeah. He's got a fantastic athlete.
Yeah, but that doesn't that say something?
You just set off Siri. Okay, I want to try it. Siri, how far did Eric Hipwood play up the ground? I don't do football. All right, sorry, go on.
Thanks, Google.
We've got an ad now.
We've got Google in there.
Go on.
She chimes in every now and then. But it's a bit of a lesson, isn't it? In the modern game, as much as Hipwood has been used as a goal kicker, you actually can get more goals out of him by getting him further up the field and into the play. Yeah,
well, provided he's got a decent enough hoof on him. Mark asks, can the Lions be a top 8 team next year? Yeah, why not?
Yeah, that gap can be bridged very quickly. I mean, North was supposed to be a bottom team this year.
That was going to be my argument,
Yeah, they can be.
There's definite improvement there. It's continuous improvement, I think.
Hipwood's almost the part of the major stumbling block, or reason why they would. A consistent forward will take them a long way.
So they won 5 last year, which was the most of any wooden spooner for 20-odd years.
Yep.
2 more wins from the last 7 and they'll match that tally. But I think even if they don't, they've been consistently competitive all year.
You know, we haven't mentioned somebody that's key to that, by the way, which we really should mention.
Who's
He had
that?
almost 30 touches, and he makes such a difference, Luke Hodge, down the back there.
Oh, yeah.
He just really does.
Yeah.
He knows when to go, he knows when to... He, not in terms of what he imparts in knowledge, but in what he imparts on the game, he's a ripper still. Does he go on next year?
Yeah, why not? Do you sign for 2 anyway?
I'm just sort of going on the Sam Mitchell dynamic where they pull the pin pretty quickly.
No, I reckon he's got another year left in him.
Yep.
Okay,
He'll be known as a Brisbane player.
Final one for you. And by the way, our computer just went to sleep. Oi. Okay, come on.
It's Siri's fault. I'm going to end up... I think we should end up with a hot. And that West Coast midfield, I had no faith in the start of the year. None whatsoever. I really didn't. Not because they lost Pritis, but because the guys that made up that midfield I thought were a bit undersized and underperformed throughout their career. Shuey, we know, has stepped up. Maston, surprisingly to me, has stepped up.
Yeah.
Did you expect him to play well this year?
No, because he's been... Yeah, no,
It's been a bit of a deceiver, hasn't
Yeah.
it? His ball usage hasn't been great, and it's impacted the rest of his game. But he's filled the void when needed.
Yeah.
And then other players run through that midfield. The big difference is Natanui, because they just love having a ruckman that then lands on his feet and becomes part of the midfield.
What about the importance? Gaff has definitely become more of an inside player. Not more than outside, but he has upped the inside part of his game.
Yeah, he really was known as a player who was, for want of a more complimentary term, a receiver. But he now is definitely an intercept mark taker and he's a beautiful mover.
He was a receiver and Maston was a deceiver.
Yeah, correct. They've probably lifted their ratings. Did we see it coming? We can't underestimate the importance that a big, good ruckman makes to that dynamic. But then there are other guys that, look, early on in the year it was a Venables. They've got good players in and around the ball. I know Luke Brennan. Is it Luke Brennan? The young Brennan?
I've just had a blank because I was thinking of Cameron Venables for some reason, who played for Collingwood about 20 years ago. It's Brennan. Okay, someone just had a... We're getting old. Remind us of Brennan's first name.
But they've got these players that are... Brennan's been there for a while, I think. I think it might be his 3rd season. But he's, nice body, in and around the contest, does his bit. Good lad. We've got a look-alike.
Yeah?
Hipwood looks like Raf Nadal.
Yeah.
Now, that's a great photo. We've been given 2 photos that really make them look similar.
Well, you could put Justin Kaczynski in there and make it a triplets, really, couldn't you?
Not really.
Oh, because he looked like Nadal.
But Hipwood, I loved Hipwood when he broke into the scene. He had the centre part. He looked like a football card or cigarette card from 1933.
Okay.
Are
you done?
No, I'm saying that midfield. I wasn't the one confusing Venables with the wrong Venables.
Well, you asked me which Brennan it was.
But I'm just saying that they've got players.
Monkey Junior.
They've got players that have helped. Hutchings he's always a good contributor when given a go.
Yeah, no, but he's got more strings to his bow now than just being a run with player, albeit he did that really well today. But I think he's lifted as well. It's funny how we were so shocked at how well they were going, but then as soon as they lost 3 in a row, it was sort of like, oh, what's going on with the Eagles? Well, hang on. Not many people tipped them to finish in the 8 anyway, so we've got sort of goldfish memories in the footy media, haven't we? Yeah. Well, not us, but everyone else. What? Okay. I'm just being stupid now. All right, that's enough for hot or not. And I'm whipping myself up now because I know I do this every week fighting, and I know you reckon I'm always pissed off.
Yes, you are.
But let me assure you, I'm about to reach levels of anger which will be very, very difficult to deal with for people at home, let alone you, my friend, sitting but a few feet away from me because I am seriously pissed off about something, and not in that joking, stupid, sort of slightly comic way. I'm really pissed off, and that can only mean one thing, of course, Mark, and it means it's time for the Rant Off! I'm pissed off with Channel 7, Finey, but not for the reasons you might think. I saw a promo yesterday for a story on that hard-hitting current affairs show Sunday night, and it made me realise what a golden opportunity 7 are missing. Tonight, they've got a ripper of a story in which they're banging on yet again about African gangs running riot. Oh, tearing up the town. Funnily enough, the only violence I've been hearing about lately has been committed by Australian-born white guys on their female partners. But if 7 isn't even going to hide the fact anymore that it's a TV network happy to pander to racism, here's an idea about how we can work that sort of lowbrow dog whistling into their football programming as well. Let's give one of the current crop of commentators the arse and replace him with Pauline Hanson. That'll get more women involved in the coverage and tap into the One Nation base in northern Queensland at the same time. Think about the post-game possibilities, Finey. Forget roaming Brian. We can have roaming racist instead. Pauline doing interviews with real Australian players and their families, presenting them with Aussie flags to drape themselves in. She can bail up Majak Dor and Alia in the rooms and demand they renounce all ties with their countries of origin, despite the fact they're contributing more to this country than any number of tax-dodging, wife-belting, substance-abusing, middle-class white folk running large corporations like, let's say, a TV network. And let's not stop there. Let's get Mark Latham, Corey Bernardi, those two clowns from that Outsiders crap on Sky News, and that dickhead from the United Patriots Front involved as well. Because if you're going to take off the veneer of respectability and go all out to appeal to people's fears and prejudices, why just confine that to current affairs? Hanson was a historical relic until Channel 7 plucked her from obscurity and whacked her on Dancing with the Stars. Come on, guys, it's time you went a step further and got her to front your footy coverage as well. Because while your slogan says, we just love the footy, you know what? I reckon the reality is you just love appealing to the lowest common denominator a whole lot more.
By the way, next season I'll be doing a football program with Andrew Bott.
That was absolute garbage, Channel 7. And I don't care if you never employ me, not that you're going to anyway, it was garbage. And people are too smart to fall for that sort of crap much longer.
I've got to say, they're not an island here. Because I was, you know what, I'd almost been taken in by some of the media African gang violence until I saw a thing on a current affair about Moomba.
No.
And Fairlingham, this is exactly what they showed. They showed a group of African youths trying to board a train and a group of white girls panicking. The reason they were panicking is because the media had conditioned them to be scared of anything shaded up from their own skin colour, and they were running onto the train, and all these African kids were doing was getting on the train as well. Now, you know what? We know that fear and sadly, groupthink and hatred sells papers and gets ratings. You know, what better way to get ratings than cancer scare, the water you drink is killing you. And this is along the same line. So it's a pretty serious topic, and I'm glad that you addressed it.
Oh, no, I thank you for saying that. And
mine is less serious.
We are better than that. We are better than that. Your turn. I'm going to count. Oh, you forgot to count me in, didn't you? I forgot to ask you to count me in.
Please explain.
Yeah, I'll count you in. 3, 2, 1, rant.
I'm tonight not ranting. I want to be calm and talk about the filming of sporting events and crowd shots and perverted cameramen taking pictures of good-looking women and what it takes to become an instant TV hero by being part of the crowd shot. Now, a history lesson. Do you know when I grew up, I used to love watching the footy replay, and then live games. And you will not believe this, younger viewer. There were no crowd shots. They actually just filmed the football. The ball went into the crowd and it came back. There were sort of wide shots of the crowd. I think the only time the crowd was ever shot in earnest was when the post fell off on them at Windy Hill.
I was there that day.
But otherwise, there were no crowd shots. Who wants to see dickheads in the crowd? You can go sit next to them. And then it began. Let me take us away from football with the current world view of the crowd shot. Take the World Cup at the moment. Gee, Russian women are beautiful, or you'd think, given that any crowd shot of a Russian female at the current World Cup is of a 10 out of 10 supermodel. The only other way you can get onto the screen at the World Cup is to be a crying infant or a totally despondent Russian after last night's loss to Croatia. Oh, by the way, the Croatian president was at the game. I could now pick him out at 90 feet. Didn't know what he looked like before the game, but he was actually on more than 7 of the Croatian players, including the chap who was able to slot the penalty at the penalty shootout to take them through to the semi-final. I don't know what he looks like, but I know what the guy in the crowd does. Let's move on to cricket. South African cameramen are famous for picking out buxom, scantily clad females in the crowd. Not many people go to the cricket in South Africa, but if you're a good-looking girl, then take your agent with you because you're going to be on TV. Let's move on to the current Canadian T20 competition. I've watched a bit of that. Smith and Warner have played. Not much, but they've played. This was a little piece of audio or a little conversation between 2 of the commentators on the back of some camera work. It's hot today. Camera pans to a good-looking girl in the crowd. Yeah, real hot. Back to the first commentator. Are we talking about the cricket or something else? Back to the second commentator. I was talking about the weather. Ha ha ha, chortle, chortle. Well, they're camera shots. But don't think that footy is beyond it. Because the camera shot is now a key part of football. And here's my guide for an AFL fan if you want to be on TV. Be the following. Famous in your own lunchtime, a la Eddie Maguire, Jeff Kennett, or any other recognisable face at the football. B. Be an adult stupid enough to get your face painted. That might get you on TV. Be a crying, inconsolable... sorry, I'll get to that in a moment. I've just been told, the Croatian president's the woman.
Yeah. She was dancing in front of the Russian president.
Who was the bloke she was with all night? Wasn't Putin.
Okay.
Anyhow, I'm glad for that. I'm glad. Yeah, who was that dark-haired bloke that was on all night? I think he was Russian, actually. Anywho, if you want to get on, be a crying child, a good-looking girl, an adult who paints your face, which is idiotic. Hold a Richmond sign about Dustin Martin. That seems to be very popular. But if you really want to get on TV, do you know the best way to do it, Rowan? Go to a Major League Baseball game and fall asleep. And I guarantee you, you'll be on Jumbo Vision. Apologies to the Croatian president. Who was that dark-haired man?
You know, very good, here, and I'd like to endorse your sentiments, and very timely you thought of it. And I reckon, tell me if the inspiration for this was footage during the Richmond-Adelaide game, behind the Richmond goals in the cheer squad.
Well, there was a woman with that full face paint that was on constantly.
What about the bloke?
Yeah,
there's a bloke that's been on about 3 weeks in a row, leading the chance.
Oh, yeah, but look, Richmond cheer squad's great because it's the only adult cheer squad still left. All the rest are creches. But, you know, they all have, they love their signs.
Yeah.
Richmond rewind or replay another flag, Dusty this, Dusty that. And then this one woman. Did you see her?
I think I know
this
the one
wasn't
you
face
mean.
painting. This was
No, I think I know the one you mean, and it was clearly queued up for BT to come in and say something suitably disparaging, and to his credit, he didn't.
It was a work of art, though. It wasn't kids' face painting. This was done by somebody at the MTC. Like, she looks like she came straight out of Cats.
Can I just tell you on that whole thing about crowd cutaways? You'll remember this. Number one worst timed crowd cutaway of all time. The year is 2005.
Oh, Leo Barrett.
Leo Barrett
Oh, yeah, of course.
has just taken the most important mark in grand final history. Sydney has just won its first premiership for 72 years. Literally, as the players fall to the turf, cue, shot, and I hope this guy's not watching because I hate him, this guy leaning into the camera going, like, is that how you want to remember your first flag in 72 years? I suspect not.
I mean, there were crowd shot favourites. There was a Geelong supporter with the Mo.
Oh, yeah, the truck driver, yeah.
And then, unfortunately, there were a couple of supporters.
What about Nancy, the old Essendon supporter in the 80s? Remember Nancy?
I mean, that was greght.
Nancy's actually now 136.
Yeah.
No, she was. I met Nancy.
Well, there was the North Melbourne Barb.
Well, there was
the one that Dirk
Barb.
The one that Dirk Wellham belted.
Yeah, Carlton.
Oh, Carlton's Barb. Sorry, Carlton's Barb.
Yeah, Barb.
But.
I was going to say.
Oh,
okay.
But I know that this sort of happened. There was a couple of supporters that they showed a few times remonstrating until they realised that those supporters, even though they were adult, might not be what they were laughing at. They shouldn't have been laughing at. Those supporters were having a great time, but they were seemingly acting over the top because that's how they followed football, and they had some learning difficulties or etc. So you've got to be very careful in choosing out your fans, and commenting about them.
Which is why it was admirable restraint from BT on that front. Well, there's our rants, and this is the yin and yang of our working together. Finally, I went the serious sort of quasi-political route.
That was.
No, I'm over it. I'm over it.
No, it was well said.
And if you're one of the United Patriots front who's been abusing me on Twitter all day, get stuffed. All right, that pretty much winds us up. Have we got our off-topic Facebook message? I think we're going to try and make a habit of this. Oh, we have. And today's, it's come from Josh, who asks, is there a real chance that it's coming home? And by coming home, he means football, of course, which the entire English country has been chanting en masse, and great win by the not the Ponds, by the English in their quarter final. I've just got.
How about the story of the bloke that got the first goal? What's his name? Harry Morgan, or who? The guy that headed the first goal.
I've forgotten his name. How am I travelling? I watched the game. He was at Leicester, and he's at Leicester now.
Yeah, he's at Leicester, and before that, not that long ago.
No, it's Mick something.
Yeah, it is. But
it's McGrath.
It's a
McGrath.
No, it's a Harry. But he was a
Stop
Harry.
throwing up names that I don't know. That's the first rule of TV. Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to.
That's okay. This isn't TV.
Yes, it is. Harry Maguire.
Yeah, I told you. Well, get on TV, become a Maguire. He was only 3 years ago. He was not in a first starting lineup in the championship.
No, you can't help but like him. I actually tweeted last night, like, every other English squad that's got there has had much bigger sort of household names.
Yeah,
mate.
Except for Harry in this one. Except for Harry Kane.
Yeah.
A little bit of Sterling.
Sterling, yeah. That'd be about it.
And Dele Alli. I'm saying that they very much... And their keeper has come
I thought their keeper was still Joe Hart until this tournament, so...
Yeah, no, he had a year at West Ham. He ain't keeping for no country. The keeper... What a save. Yeah. We digress.
I've just got, we do digress. We do that often. I've just got visions of a final between England and France, and the French finally extracting revenge for the Battle of Waterloo only 250 odd years ago.
That is an odd vision.
A what?
An odd vision.
Oh, an odd vision. Yeah, I don't know. Just popped into my head. Okay, I think we're done here. So thanks for your company. Big thank you to Southern FM for letting us film here. Big thank you to Mal, who pulls it all together, and Andrew, Mr. Music, Mr. Social Media guy. No, not thanks to them, they're ugly. But thanks for your company.
And our sponsors.
And our sponsors, the Hari Krishnas. Let us know if you like the format. And we'll come back next week. Pick up your papers, Finey, because we're going to sign off in traditional fashion. May your football be good football, and good night.